He was a billionaire, a titan of industry named Marcus Thorne, used to a world that bent to his will. She was a waitress, Elena Sanchez, invisible to men like him. But when his unchecked rage exploded in the middle of a packed five-star restaurant, he made one fatal mistake. He pushed her too far. He thought she was nobody, just another cog in the service machine. He didn't realize this nobody was the one person alive who knew his darkest, most guarded secret. Her reply wasn't just a comeback. It was a detonation. This is the story of the one sentence that froze an entire restaurant, shattered a corrupt empire, and proved that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way to the surface. The restaurant was La Chandelier, a cathedral of fine dining in downtown Chicago. Its ceilings were 2 stories high, adorned with crystal fixtures that cost more than the average American home. The clientele was a whispering, glittering collection of old money and new tech, all pretending not to watch each other. Into this hushed world, Elena Sanchez moved with practiced, invisible grace. At 29, Elena was a woman who had perfected the art of being overlooked. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe regulation bun. Her face, which in another life had been bright and animated, was now a mask of polite neutrality. She was efficient, she was silent, and she was, by all accounts, an excellent waitress. She was also living a lie. Her closest friend on staff, Sarah, often watched her. "Elena," Sarah would whisper during a lull by the server station, "you don't belong here. You walk like you own the place, but you serve tables like you're hiding. It's weird." Elena would just offer a tight smile. "We all have our pasts, Sarah. I just need the job." Tonight, the restaurant was buzzing with a nervous energy. A whale was coming in. That's what the manager, Julian, had called him. "Listen up, everyone," Julian had briefed them, his face pale and sweaty. "Marcus Thorne is dining with us tonight. Table 12. This is a zero-mistake evening. He is particular. He is also one of the richest men in the world. Elena, you're on his section. You're my best. Don't let me down." Elena felt a prickle of something, but not recognition. The name Marcus Thorne was just a headline, a shadow on the financial news. She nodded, her face impassive. "Yes, Julian." At 8:03 p.m., the heavy oak doors of La Chandelier swung open, and a cold gust of entitlement swept in. Marcus Thorne was not a large man, but he occupied the space of 3. He was sharp, dressed in a $20,000 bespoke suit, with silver hair swept back from a face that looked like it had been carved from unforgiving marble. His eyes were a piercing, icy blue. He was flanked by 2 younger associates, a man and a woman in their late 20s, Mr. Hayes and Ms. Croft. They vibrated with a sycophantic terror, laughing too loudly at his non-jokes, pulling out his chair, anticipating his every need. "The lighting in here is appalling," Thorne snapped, his voice carrying across the dining room. Several forks paused mid-air. "It's like dining in a morgue, and this table, it's wobbling. Do you expect me to eat on a wobbling table?" Julian was there in an instant, foldable shims in hand. "My apologies, Mr. Thorne." "Right away." Elena watched from a distance, a tray balanced on her hand. She felt a familiar, cold dread. It wasn't fear of a customer. It was the recognition of a type, the kind of man who built himself up by tearing others down, the kind of man she had dedicated the last 5 years of her life to avoiding. The first hour of the service was excruciating. Marcus Thorne sent back his wine twice. The first, a 1989 Petrus, was corked, though the sommelier looked ready to weep. The second was too cold. He complained that the ambient chatter from a nearby table was distracting and made Julian move the offending couple, offering them free champagne for their trouble. Elena was a ghost. She refilled water glasses without a sound. She placed plates with surgical precision. She endured Miss Croft snapping her fingers for more bread. She endured Mr. Hayes treating her like a piece of furniture, handing her his used napkin as if she were a waste bin. Through it all, Marcus Thorne stared at her. Not at her, but through her. She was a function, a pair of hands. The catalyst, when it came, was so small, so utterly mundane, that it was absurd. Eleanor was performing a water refill. She moved around the table, her movements fluid. As she reached for Mr. Hayes's glass, he gestured emphatically while telling a story. His elbow connected with her wrist. It wasn't a hard hit, but it was enough. A few drops of icy water, no more than a teaspoon, spilled from the silver pitcher onto the white tablecloth, landing perilously close to Marcus Thorne's pristine suit cuff. Mr. Hayes froze. Ms. Croft gasped. The restaurant, which had been at a low hum, seemed to suck all the air out of the room. Marcus Thorne looked at the damp spot on the cloth. He looked at the pitcher in Eleanor's hand. He looked at her face. His own face, which had been a mask of bored arrogance, darkened into a thundercloud. "You," he said, his voice quiet, which was somehow more terrifying than a yell. "I do apologize, sir," Elena began, blotting the spill with a fresh napkin. "My colleague—" "You clumsy, incompetent child," he hissed. And then the volume rose. The quiet control vanished, replaced by a pure, unfiltered rage that had clearly been simmering all night. "Are you an idiot?" he roared. Every single person in La Chandelier stopped. The scraping of cutlery, the clinking of glasses, the murmur of conversations, all gone. "This suit is Xenia. Do you have any idea what this costs? Do you know how much money I am spending in this mediocre establishment tonight?" "And you nothing," he said, the word dripping with venom. "You come here and you ruin it." Julian was sprinting over, his face ashen. "Mr. Thorne, please, Get away from me!" Thorne barked at the manager, pointing a trembling finger at Eleanor. "You, look at me when I'm speaking to you. Do you know who I am? Do you have any concept of the damage you just caused?" Elena stood perfectly still. Her hands were at her sides, but they were clenched so tightly her fingernails were digging into her palms. She wasn't looking at his suit. She was looking at his face, the silver hair, the icy blue eyes, the specific cadence of his rage, the way his left upper lip curled slightly when he said the word incompetent. It wasn't just the face of an arrogant billionaire. It was a ghost. It was the man from her nightmares. It was the man she had run from 5 years ago. The name, Marcus Thorne. It hadn't registered, but the face, oh God, the face. He wasn't just a Marcus. He was her Marcus. I... Elena stammered, the blood draining from her face. "What? Can't even form a sentence?" he sneered, leaning in. "You probably make minimum wage. I could have you fired. I will have you fired. I will buy this restaurant and have you blacklisted from this entire city. You are nothing." He raised his hand, not to strike, but to dismiss her with a wave. And in that moment, the 5 years of fear, of hiding, of working double shifts, of living in a tiny, roach-infested apartment, it all boiled over. The fear was replaced by a white-hot, clarifying rage. The polite, invisible waitress evaporated. Elena Sanchez died, and in her place, for one terrifying, crystalline moment, Ilara Vane returned. She looked him dead in the eye. Her voice didn't shake. It was low, sharp, and it cut through the silence like a diamond blade. "How dare you speak to me that way? Marcus, after what happened in Geneva?" If Marcus Thorne's roar had sucked the air out of the room, Elena's sentence plunged it into an arctic void. It was absolute silence, the kind of silence that is so profound you can hear your own heartbeat. Mr. Hayes and Ms. Croft, who had been enjoying the show with cruel little smirks, froze, their faces comical masks of confusion. Who was this waitress? How did she know his first name? What happened in Geneva? Julian, the manager, who had been halfway through a grovelling apology, stopped with his mouth open. Across the room, a man dining alone, a handsome, sombre man in his early 30s, slowly lowered his wine glass. He had been watching the scene with detached disgust. Now his eyes were writhed to Eleanor, his brow furrowed in sudden, sharp recognition. He knew that face. But from where? But the true epicenter of the freeze was Marcus Thorne himself. His face went through a rapid, violent series of transformations. The apoplectic, purple rage drained away, replaced by a chalk-white shock. His eyes widened, the icy blue turning glassy. His jaw, which had been working furiously, went slack. He didn't just recognize her. He saw her. He wasn't seeing a clumsy waitress named Elena Sanchez. He was seeing Ilara Vane, his 25-year-old prodigy, his brilliant, four-language fluent financial analyst, the girl he had personally mentored, the one he had called his secret weapon, the woman who had been in the hotel suite in Geneva, the witness, the woman who had vanished off the face of the earth 5 years ago, the same week his business partner, Richard Sterling, was found dead on the pavement below his hotel balcony. "What?" Marcus whispered. It was a pathetic sound, a leak of air from a collapsing balloon. "What did you say?" Elena's mask of neutrality was gone. Her eyes were burning. She had just detonated her own life, thrown a match on the very secrecy she had cultivated for half a decade. She knew, in that instant, there was no going back. She had run for 5 years, and she was done. "I said," she repeated, her voice clearer now, carrying to the surrounding tables. "You should know better. You of all people." She looked at his stunned face, at the 2 idiot associates, at the terrified manager. She didn't feel fear. She felt free. With a deliberateness that was almost violent, Elena reached up and untied the knot of her black apron. She pulled it off, her movements sharp. She held it for a beat, staring directly into Marcus Thorne's terrified eyes. Then she let it drop onto the floor. "I quit," she said. Not to Julian, but to Marcus. Without another word, Elena Sanchez turned on her heel and walked out of the restaurant. She didn't run. She walked, her back straight, her head high, past the stunned hostess, through the heavy oak doors, and out into the cold Chicago night. Back in the dining room, the freeze held for another 10 seconds. Then, chaos. Marcus Thorne staggered back, clutching the table for support. Get the car," he stammered to Hayes. "But Mr. Thorne, your dinner," Ms. Croft began. "Now!" he bellowed, his voice cracking with a new emotion. It wasn't anger. It was raw, unadulterated panic. He threw his napkin onto the table and stormed out, shoving a waiter out of his path. Hayes and Croft scrambled after him. Julian just stood there, staring at the discarded apron on the floor. And across the room, the lone diner, Dr. Aris Thorne, son of Marcus Thorne, threw $500 bills on his table. He didn't follow his father. He ran out the door after the waitress. He hadn't recognized her name, but he had finally placed her face. She was Ilara Vane, the last person to see his godfather, Richard Sterling, alive. The alley behind La Chandelière was cold and smelled of stale grease. Elena pressed her back against the rough brick, gulping in the freezing air. The adrenaline was so potent it made her shake, her teeth chattering from shock, not cold. "Oh God, oh God, oh God," she whispered, sliding down the wall until she was crouched on the pavement. What did I do? What did I just do? She had done the one thing she had sworn she would never do. She had shown her face. She had spoken his name. She had mentioned Geneva. The back door burst open, and Sarah ran out, her own apron still on. "Elena! Elena, are you okay? What in God's name was that? Who was that guy? Geneva? Like Switzerland? What did you—" "I can't, Sarah. I have to go." Elena scrambled to her feet, her mind racing. Her apartment, her go bag, the safe deposit box. Go where? "Elena, you're scaring me. The manager is losing his mind. And that maniac. He looked like he'd seen a ghost." "He did, Sarah." Elena's eyes were wild. "He saw me." Before Sarah could ask another question, a voice called out from the mouth of the alley, "Miss Vane?" Elena froze. Vane, not Sanchez. She turned. The man from the restaurant, the lone diner, was walking toward her, his hands raised in a peaceful gesture. "Miss Vane, please. Ilara, don't run. I'm not with him." "Who are you? How do you know that name?" Elena backed away, grabbing a loose brick from a crumbling half-wall. "My name is Aris Thorne." Elena's blood ran cold. "Thorne. His son?" "Yes," Aris said, stopping 10 feet away. He had a kind face, but it was haunted by a deep sadness. "But I am not my father. I'm a doctor. I was there that night, at the hotel. Not in the room, but I was there. I'm Richard Sterling's godson." Elena stared at him. Richard Sterling. The name was a wound that had never healed. Her mentor. The kind, gentle partner who had tried to stop Marcus. The man who had ended up a red smear on a Swiss street. "What do you want?" she whispered, her voice raw. "I want to help you," Aris said, "because I think you're the only person on earth who can help me." Meanwhile, in a black Cadillac Escalade tearing through the city, "Find her!" Marcus Thorne was roaring into his phone. He wasn't speaking to Hayes or Croft, who sat silently, terrified, in the opposite seats. He was speaking to his head of security, a man named Mr. Graves. "Sir, who are we looking for?" "A woman. She was a waitress at Le Chandelier. Name of Elena Sanchez. It's an alias. Her real name is Ilara Vane. Vane. She's about 5'7", dark hair, brown eyes. She knows about Geneva." There was a silence on the line. Graves was a man who understood subtext. "Geneva, sir." "Yes, Geneva." Marcus slammed his fist on the armrest. "She has it. She must. Why else would she disappear? Why else would she show up now?" What does she have, sir?" Hayes ventured, his voice trembling. Marcus turned to him, his eyes black with panic. "The files, you idiot. The original files. The unedited data, the voice memos. She was Sterling's pet. He must have given her a copy." He turned back to the phone. "Graves, I don't care what it costs. I don't care what you have to do. Find her. Find Ilara Vane. Shut her up. Permanently." Marcus Thorne hung up. He was breathing heavily, wiping a sheen of sweat from his upper lip. He had built an empire on the lie of Geneva. He had buried a man and a mountain of evidence to protect it. And it was all about to be unearthed by a waitress with a good memory. To understand the sentence that froze the restaurant, you have to understand what happened in that hotel suite 5 years ago. Geneva, Switzerland, the Hotel President Wilson, a 25-year-old Ilara Vane, sat in the corner of a 30,000 a night royal penthouse suite. She was the star analyst and personal translator for Marcus Thorne, a man she revered as a genius. He was negotiating a merger with a private Swiss bank, a deal that would make him the most powerful financier in the world. With them was his partner, Richard Sterling. Richard was the soul of the company, the good cop to Marcus's bad cop. He was also Aris's godfather and Ilara's mentor. He'd seen her talent in the translation pool and promoted her. But the deal was falling apart. The Swiss, represented by a formidable man named Jean-Pierre Dubois, were getting cold feet. They had found irregularities in Thorne's third-quarter projections. "We are finished," Richard said, pacing the suite after Dubois had left. "He knows. He's going to back out and alert the SEC. We're ruined, Marcus." "We are not ruined," Marcus said, his voice calm. He was pouring a brandy. "We just changed the terms." "Changed the terms? He just accused us of fraud." "He implied fraud, Richard. We just need to incentivize him." Marcus smiled, and Ilara felt a chill. "Dubois has a weakness. His bank is over-leveraged on a new tech stock, a stock that we can manipulate." Ilara, who had been silently typing minutes, looked up. "Sir? Manipulate?" Marcus looked at her, as if just remembering she was there. "Ilara. Good. You're here. I need you to draft a new report. We're going to start a rumor, a very plausible one, that the tech company's main patent has been invalidated. We leak it through our offshore channels. The stock will collapse by morning." Ilara and Richard stared at him. "Marcus, that's insider trading. It's market manipulation. It's a felony," Richard said, his voice quiet. "It's business, Richard." Marcus slammed the glass down. "The Swiss bank's portfolio will be decimated. They'll be on the verge of insolvency. Dubois will be ruined. Then I will walk back in, offer to save them, and acquire their entire bank and its holdings for 20 cents on the dollar." "My God," Richard whispered. "You're not a businessman. You're a pirate. I won't be a part of this. I'm going to call Dubois. I'm going to tell him what you're planning, and then I'm calling the authorities." Richard turned to leave. Marcus moved faster than Ilara had ever seen. He grabbed Richard by the arm, spinning him around. "You'll do no such thing," Marcus hissed, his face inches from Richard's. "This company is my life's work. You will not burn it down because you've developed a sudden conscience." "It's over, Marcus. I'm done. I'll testify." "Ilara, you heard him. You're a witness." Marcus's eyes flicked to Ilara. The cold, calculating gaze was terrifying. "She's a witness to nothing. She's a translator who misheard." "Right, Ilara." Ilara was frozen in terror. Richard pulled his arm free. "You're a monster, Marcus." He turned to Ilara. "Ilara, get out of here. Go to the consulate. Tell them what you heard." Richard started for the door again. "I'm going to my room to pack, and I'm taking my evidence with me." "What evidence?" Marcus barked. Richard tapped his breast pocket, where a small digital voice recorder was clipped. "You've gotten sloppy, Marcus. You just confessed to conspiracy to commit fraud. I've got it all." A terrible primal rage contorted Marcus's features. He lunged at Richard, tackling him. They crashed against the wall. Ilara screamed. "Give it to me!" Marcus roared, grappling for the recorder. "No!" Marcus was stronger, fueled by pure desperation. He slammed Richard's head against the wall. Richard went limp, falling to the floor. Marcus ripped the recorder from his pocket. "Sir!" Ilara cried, running forward. Marcus held up a hand, breathing heavily. He looked at the recorder, then at Richard's unconscious form. "Ilara," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "Go to your room. Forget what you saw. You were never here. This was a private discussion between partners." "But he's hurt. He's drunk. He fell. Go. Now." Terrified, Ilara fled the room. She ran to her own room down the hall. She locked the door, her entire body shaking. She began to pack, her mind screaming. "Go to the police. Go to the consulate." But before she could, she heard a commotion from the hallway. shouting, and then a terrible, long, fading scream. She ran to her balcony. She looked down, and on the pristine pavement, 12 stories below, was a broken shape. She heard a single, calm voice from the balcony of the penthouse suite. It was Marcus. He was on the phone. "Yes, police? My God, it's terrible. My partner. Richard Sterling. He was depressed. He'd been drinking. He jumped." Ilara knew. He hadn't jumped. Marcus had either pushed him or staged it after he was already dead. She knew she was the only loose end. She didn't go to the police. She knew how powerful Marcus was. He'd crush her. He'd say she was a hysterical girl, a scorned lover, an accomplice. She grabbed her laptop, which contained all the original data and projections for the Swiss deal, the very data that proved Richard's fraud claims were true. As a backup, she had also been CC'd on an audio file from Richard earlier that day, a different recording, one he'd made himself, detailing his suspicions about Marcus. She transferred everything to a single, encrypted, biometric-locked hard drive. She didn't take the elevator. She ran down the service stairs, out the back, and into the Geneva night. She took a train to Zurich, used her emergency cash to buy a new identity from a black market contact, and flew to America. Ilara Vane died, and Elena Sanchez, a waitress, was born. She hid in plain sight, in a low-wage job she assumed a man like Marcus Thorne would never, ever encounter. Until tonight. Elena's world was moving at 1,000 miles per hour. One moment she was in an alley. The next, she was in the passenger seat of an Audi e-tron, speeding through the Chicago streets. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice trembling. "My apartment. It's the only safe place I know," Aris Thorne said, his eyes scanning the rearview mirror. "My father. He won't look for you there. Not at first. He and I. We haven't spoken in 5 years. Not since Richard's funeral." "The funeral," Elena whispered, remembering. She had watched it on a news stream from a dimly lit internet cafe in Prague. Marcus Thorne, weeping, carrying the casket of the man he had murdered. "I called him a killer that day," Aris said, his voice tight with old grief. "In front of everyone. He disinherited me on the spot. I didn't care. I'm a trauma surgeon. I don't need his blood money." They pulled into a secure underground garage. Aris led her to a private elevator that opened directly into a stunning, minimalist penthouse. It was all glass and steel, overlooking Lake Michigan. It was a fortress. "You said you wanted my help," Elena said, standing in the middle of the vast living room. "For what?" "To prove it," Aris said, his voice intense. "To prove he killed Richard. You were there. You were the witness." Elena flinched. "I was a coward. I heard them fight. I heard him confess to the fraud. But I didn't see him push Richard. I ran. I've been running ever since." "But you have evidence, don't you? That's why he looked so scared. You have the files. The ones Richard was talking about." Elena hesitated. Trusting a Thorne felt like swallowing poison. But looking at Aris's eyes, she saw the same pain she felt. He wasn't his father. "Yes," she said, her voice barely audible. "I have it all. The original Swiss projections, the data he planned to use for the market manipulation, and a voice memo. One Richard sent me that morning. He said he was scared. He detailed everything he suspected Marcus of doing." Aris's face lit up with a fierce, vindicated light. "Where is it? We can take it to the FBI, to the SEC. It's not that simple. It's on an encrypted drive in a safe deposit box at Metropolitan Trust, downtown. It's keyed to my old biometrics, my thumbprint and retina under the name Ilara Vane. And it has a vocal passphrase failsafe, a sentence Richard made me memorize." What is it? If I don't speak the phrase exactly, or if my biometrics are under duress, the drive's contents are wiped. Permanently. Aris's face fell. So, you have to retrieve it. In person. Yes, Elena said. And the second I use my biometrics, an alert will be flagged. Marcus will know where I am. He must have systems in place. He'll be watching for Ilara Vane to reappear at any bank, any airport. Then we're trapped, Aris said, slumping onto a sofa. No, Elena said, the fog of panic finally clearing, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. He's hunting me. He's expecting me to be scared, to be running. He's not expecting me to be running at him. She looked at Aris. You're a doctor. You have access to things. I need a disguise, a good one. And I need a diversion, a big one. Your father is a creature of ego and greed. We're going to use that against him. What? What are you thinking? He's not just hunting me, Elena said, a plan forming in her mind. He's also hunting his money, his reputation. While his men are tearing the city apart looking for Elena Sanchez, we're going to give him a bigger problem to deal with. She pointed to his laptop. You're still a Thorn. You must have access to some internal company servers. I need you to leak something. Something that will send the stock into a nosedive and get the SEC crawling all over his headquarters. Something that will pull all his security, including Graves, into one place to do damage control. Aris looked at her, a slow smile spreading. I think I have just the thing. The undoctored financials for the new Singapore project. He's been cooking the books for 6 months. Good, Elena said. You create the firestorm. And while he's busy putting it out, I'll walk into the bank and get the evidence that burns him to the ground. The next morning, Chicago's financial district woke to a bombshell. A hacker, Aris, had anonymously leaked the internal projections for Thorn Industries' massive Singapore project, revealing a $4.8 billion deficit that had been fraudulently reported as a $2 billion profit. By 9:30 a.m., Thorn Industries' stock, THI, was in freefall, plummeting 60%. In his penthouse office, Marcus Thorn was a caged lion. "Find the leak! Find him!" he screamed at his tech team. "Mr. Thorn!" Graves, his security chief, burst in. "The SEC is on line 1, and there are federal agents in the lobby. They have a warrant." "Stall them!" Marcus roared. This is her, Ilara Vane. She did this." "Sir, the leak came from an IP in North Korea," a tech said. "It wasn't her." "I don't care. It's all connected." Marcus's eyes were wild. He was bleeding from a dozen new wounds. "Graves, forget the waitress. She can wait. Get down to the lobby. Handle the feds. I need all hands on deck. This is containment. Now." Graves and his entire security team raced from the office, leaving Marcus to his lawyers and the impending financial apocalypse. 20 blocks away, a woman walked into the downtown branch of Metropolitan Trust. She was not Elena Sanchez. She was no one. She wore a simple, mousy brown wig, glasses, and a bland beige pantsuit. She was the picture of forgettable bureaucracy. She walked to the vault services. "Ilara Vane," she said to the clerk, "to access my box, 713. The clerk, David, checked his system. "Of course, Miss Vane, if you'll just follow me." Elena's heart was a drum against her ribs. She followed David into the secure room. She placed her thumb on the scanner. It flashed green. She leaned into the retinal scanner. It flashed green. The clerk's computer pinged. A silent alarm. Flagged account. Notify security. David, the clerk, smiled nervously. "Just one moment, Miss Vane. I need my supervisor's code. He stepped out. Elena knew she had seconds. David didn't go to his supervisor. He went to the back office and picked up the phone. "This is David at the downtown branch." "Yes, the flagged account. She's here." He wasn't calling the police. Back in the vault, Elena was led to box 713. The clerk used his key, Elena used hers, and the metal box slid open. Inside, sitting on black velvet, was a single, sleek, silver hard drive. Elena's fingers closed around it. It was cold to the touch. "Thank you, David," she said, her voice calm. "I'll be right out." She slid the drive into her blazer pocket. She walked out of the vault and into a trap. But the men waiting for her weren't from Thorn Industries. They weren't Graves's men. It was Mr. Hayes and Miss Croft, the two young associates from the restaurant, and they were holding guns. "Hello, Alara," Hayes said, a greedy, triumphant smile on his face. "Or is it Elena?" The clerk, David, was standing behind them, his face pale. They made me," he stammered. "Shut up, David," Croft snapped. "Give it to us, Alara." Elena's mind raced. What is this? Does Marcus know you're here?" Hayes laughed, a cold, ugly sound. "Marcus is a little distracted this morning. Big news, isn't it? The Singapore project. It seems the old man is finished. We just thought we'd secure our severance package." "You're betraying him," Elena said, stalling. "He betrayed himself," Hayes said, stepping forward, his gun leveled at her chest. "He got sloppy. He got old. And he got caught by a waitress, now the drive. We know what's on it. It's our ticket to blackmailing what's left of the company, or our get-out-of-jail-free card. Your choice." "You'll never be able to open it," Elena said. "It's biometrically locked to me." "We know," Croft said, pulling a small, cruel-looking knife from her pocket. "We don't need your whole body, just your thumb, and maybe an eyeball. Hand it over, or we take it piece by piece." Elena looked at Hayes, then at Croft. They were amateurs, dangerous but sloppy. They hadn't counted on one thing. "You're right," Elena said, reaching slowly into her pocket. "He did get sloppy." She pulled her hand out. But it wasn't holding the drive. It was holding a tiny, high-pitched personal alarm. She clicked it. A piercing, 130-decibel shriek filled the bank lobby. Hayes and Croft cried out, clutching their ears. In the same motion, Elena grabbed the heavy, velvet-roped stanchion from the bank line and swung it with all her strength into Hayes's knees. He howled and collapsed, his gun clattering across the marble floor. Croft lunged, but Eleanor was already moving. She ran for the door. She burst onto the street, breathing hard, the alarm still screaming in her hand. She saw Aris's Audi parked across the street, and she sprinted for it. "Go, go, go!" she yelled, jumping into the passenger seat. But as Oris slammed the car into gear, a black sedan that had been parked down the street peeled out, tires smoking. It wasn't Hayes. It was Mr. Graves. Marcus Thorne was distracted, but he wasn't stupid. He had left one man behind, just in case. "He's behind us!" Aris yelled, swerving into traffic. The Escalade was a tank. It slammed into their rear quarter panel, sending the Audi spinning. Elena screamed as they jumped the curb, crashing into a hot dog stand. Graves was out of the truck, his gun drawn, running toward them. "Aris, run!" Elena cried. Aris was dazed, the airbag smoke filling the car. "The drive! He wants the drive!" Elena scrambled out of the passenger side. Graves saw her. "Miss Vane, stop!" Elena ran, clutching the drive. She dodged between taxis, heading for the sanctuary of a crowded plaza. "Stop!" She heard a crack. It wasn't a gunshot. It was a thud. She turned. Aris Thorne had tackled Graves from the side. The two men were grappling on the pavement. The gun was loose. "Aris!" Graves was a trained professional. He was bigger and stronger. He threw Aris off, grabbed the gun, and rolled to his feet. He aimed the gun, not at Elena, but at Aris. "No!" Elena screamed. Bang! The sound of the gunshot echoed off the buildings. Aris didn't fall. Graves did. He looked down at his chest, a spreading red stain, then collapsed. Standing behind him, his own hand shaking, holding a small handgun, was the bank clerk, David. I, David stammered, dropping the gun. I have a permit. Oh my God. Elena ran back. Aris was on his hands and knees, breathing hard. Are you okay? I'm fine, Aris panted. He saved my life. Sirens were closing in from all directions. Police cars, an ambulance. Elena helped Aris up. She looked at the drive in her hand. She looked at the chaotic scene. Hayes and Croft were being led out of the bank in handcuffs. Graves was being worked on by paramedics. David was sitting on the curb, in shock. It's over, Aris whispered. No, Elena said, her face set. It's not. Not yet. This is just the end of the beginning. The interrogation room was cold and sterile. For 2 hours, Elena, now Ilara Vane, once again, had sat in silence. She hadn't said a word. The door opened. A man in an impeccable blue suit walked in. He wasn't a cop. He was federal. Agent David Chen, he said, sitting down. FBI, white-collar crime. We've been building a case on Marcus Thorne for 5 years, Miss Vane, ever since Richard Sterling took a nosedive in Geneva. You knew? Ilara asked, her voice hoarse. We suspected. We knew the suicide was too clean. We knew Thorne's numbers were too good. But we had nothing concrete. Thorne's lawyers are a fortress. Everyone we tried to flip was either too scared or too loyal. He leaned forward. And then this morning, the Singapore leak. An absolute gift. We got our warrant. But it's just numbers. A good lawyer could bury us in appeals for a decade. And then, a shooting at a bank, and you appear, clutching this. He gestured to the hard drive, now in an evidence bag on the table. What's on it, Ms. Vane? Everything, Ilara said. She told him about the original data, the fraud, and then she told him about the voice memo. A voice memo? From Richard. The day he died, he knew Marcus was planning the fraud. He recorded his suspicions and sent it to me for safekeeping. He says in the memo, if anything happens to me, Ilara, it wasn't an accident. It was Marcus. Agent Chen's eyes widened. That's motive. It's premeditation. It's not just fraud anymore. I'll give you the passphrase, Ilara said. I'll give you everything. I'll testify. On one condition. Immunity? Witness protection? Done. No, Ilara said. I'm done hiding. My condition is that I am in the room when you play it for him. I want to see his face. Thorne Industries headquarters, 50th floor. The office was in shambles. Agents were carting out boxes. Marcus Thorne sat at his massive oak desk, surrounded by lawyers, his face a mask of stone. He had been untouchable for so long. This was just an inconvenience. Agent Chen walked in, followed by 2 marshals and Ilara Vane. Marcus's eyes locked on her. The stone mask cracked. You, he spat. You did this. I didn't do anything, Marcus, Ilara said, her voice steady. You did. This is harassment, a lawyer shouted. My client is cooperating. Then he'll be happy to listen to this, Agent Chen said. He placed a speaker on the desk and pressed play on a laptop. First, there was static, and then a voice. Richard Sterling's voice. Memo 10. 1 a.m. Geneva. I've just confronted Marcus about the Swiss deal. He's not just cooking the books. He's planning to commit wholesale market manipulation. A felony. I told him I was going to the authorities. Marcus's face went white. Richard's voice continued, laced with fear. He threatened me. Not outright. But the look in his eye, he's desperate. He's not the man I knew. If anything happens to me, Elara, if anything happens, it wasn't an accident. It was Marcus. It was Marcus Thorne. The recording ended. Silence. Marcus Thorne looked at the speaker. He looked at his lawyers who were staring at him in horror. He looked at Agent Chen. Finally his eyes settled on Elara. There was no rage left. No power. Just the hollow, empty core of a man who had finally been caught. It was his word against mine, Marcus whispered. Not anymore, Agent Chen said. Marcus Thorne, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit securities fraud, wire fraud, and as a person of interest in the death of Richard Sterling. As the marshals pulled him to his feet and put his hands behind his back, Marcus didn't struggle. He just stared at Elara. His empire, his name, his life, all of it, undone by a waitress, undone by the past. He thought he had buried 12 stories beneath a Swiss street. 6 months later, on a wind-swept Chicago afternoon, a bell jingled over the door of a small cafe on a quiet, tree-lined street in Lincoln Park. The sign, painted in elegant, simple gold script, read, "The Geneva Cafe." The inside was the complete antithesis of La Chandelière. Where the restaurant had been a vast, cold cathedral of crystal and marble, the cafe was intimate, warm, and real. It was all exposed brick, reclaimed dark wood, and shelves filled with books and mismatched pottery. The air didn't smell of fear and expensive perfume. It smelled of fresh ground coffee, cardamom, and baking bread. Elena Sanchez was behind the counter, her hair tied back in a simple, loose knot, a dusting of flour on her apron. Her movements were no longer the practiced, invisible and fearful motions of a waitress. They were unhurried, proprietary, and content. "See you tomorrow, Mrs. Petrov," she said, handing a small bag of pastries to an elderly woman who patted her hand. "You're a good girl, Elena. This neighborhood needed you," the woman said with a thick accent before shuffling out. Elena smiled, wiping down the gleaming espresso machine. She was no longer Elara Vane, the analyst prodigy. She was no longer Elena Sanchez, the invisible ghost. She was just Elena, the woman who knew her regulars by name. The bell jingled again. It was almost 5 p.m., closing time. "Sorry, we're just closing up," she called out, not looking up. "That's a shame," a man's voice replied. "I came all this way. I heard the coffee here was life-changing." Elena froze, then a slow, genuine smile spread across her face. She looked up. Aris Thorne was standing there, his overcoat unbuttoned, his arm completely out of its sling. He looked lighter. The haunting sadness that had shadowed him for 5 years was finally receding. "Aris," she said, her voice warm. "You came. I told you I would," he said, taking a seat at the small wooden bar. "The foundation is officially open. We just approved our first grant." After his father's company was dismantled and liquidated by the SEC, Aris had used every cent of his non-fraudulent inheritance to establish the Richard Sterling Foundation for Corporate Ethics. Its entire mission was to fund whistleblower protection programs and support corporate transparency. Using the Thorne name to fund the very thing that took down Thorne Industries, Aris said, with a wry, sad smile. "My father would have despised it. Richard would have loved it," Elena said softly. She began to prepare an espresso, her movements fluid and sure. One Geneva special coming up. Aris looked around the cafe, then at the sign by the door. "The Geneva Cafe," he said, his voice quiet. Are you sure you wanted to be reminded of that every day? Of that night?" Elena paused. She looked at the steam rising from the machine. "I thought about that," she admitted. For a long time, Geneva was a word that meant fear. It meant the end of my life, the death of my friend. It was the nightmare I ran from. She turned, placing the small cup in front of him. But I'm not running anymore. That night in the restaurant, when I said that word to him, it changed. It stopped being his word, and it became mine. It's not a reminder of the end, Aris. It's a reminder of the beginning. It's the place where the lie finally broke, and the truth, no matter how terrifying, came out. I won't let him own that word. It's my word now. It means freedom. Aris stared at her, a profound respect in his eyes. You're a hell of a lot stronger than I am. You tackled a man with a gun, she countered with a small smile. I'd say we're even. He laughed, taking a sip of the coffee. It's good. Really good. He grew serious again. Do you ever miss it? The old life, the glass towers, the private jets, the power. Eleanor thought for a moment, looking out the window as the first streetlights flickered on. That wasn't power, Aris. That was a beautiful, cold cage. I was Lara Vane, the prodigy. But I was also Marcus's translator, Marcus's analyst. I was a possession. He thought he owned me, just like he owned that restaurant, just like he owned Richard. She leaned on the counter, the setting sun catching the warmth in her eyes. This is real. The hours are terrible, the pay is a joke, and I have to unclog the drain myself. But I'm not hiding. I'm not performing. I'm just here. That's a power he never could have understood. She poured a small coffee for herself. Aris raised his cup. To Richard? Elena raised hers. To Richard, she whispered. He would have loved this place. He always hated how stuffy those boardrooms were. They drank, the silence settling between them. Outside, the city hurried home. Inside, the cafe was still. Elena thought back to that night at La Chandelière, to that sudden, arctic, terrifying silence born of fear and shock. This silence was different. It wasn't a vacuum. It was warm, full, and comfortable. It was the sound of peace. The trial had been a media circus, ending abruptly when Marcus Thorne, facing a lifetime in prison, was found dead in his cell. He died a coward, just as he had lived. Hayes and Croft, for their part, were serving 10 years for armed robbery. But here, in this small cafe, those names were just ghosts. They had no power. The nothing waitress had reclaimed her name, her life, and her peace. And in the end, that was the only kind of wealth that mattered. And so, the silence that fell over La Chandelière that night was only the beginning. It was the sound of a carefully constructed lie finally breaking apart. Elena Sanchez, Lara Vane, proved that a name doesn't define you, but your courage does. She didn't just get justice for Richard. She reclaimed her own life, one cup of coffee at a time. The powerful, like Marcus Thorne, often forget that the people they step on, the people they dismiss as nothing, have memories. They forget that those nobodies are often the somebodies who hold the real power, the truth. What did you think of Eleanor's one sentence? What would you have done in her position? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, and your story could be our next. Thank you for watching this story of justice and redemption. If you were moved by Elena's journey, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing this video with someone who needs to see that truth wins, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas every single week. Don't forget to click that notification bell so you never miss an update.